I loved President Kennedy, but despite my feelings for Jack, he was, after all, a married man, so our affair remained secret. But it endured, and it wasn't just about sex. We helped each other. John often turned to me for advice. I encouraged him to pull out of Berlin, advised him on the Cuban Missile Crisis, and even encouraged him to sign that silly old nuclear peace treaty. So, in conclusion, I ask you to ask not what your mistress can do for you, but what your mistress can do for your country.
Matthew Vaughn's lay a kick, a Coen brothers stand up with Timothy Chalamet. A Citizen Kane prequel, a Midnight Cowboy sequel, Alvin and the Chipmunks deserve another squeak. There's so many new ways to revisit sideways, but a graphic novel is how we choose to update. But we still hold fast, you can't change the past on the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Invented in the 1950s, T-ball was developed as a way for kids to play baseball without the pressure of hitting a ball thrown at them at variable heights and speeds, but instead, they hit the ball off a motionless tee, akin to a golf swing. Though the inventor of T-ball is widely disputed, it was officially trademarked in 1971 by Robert Dayton Hobbs, a fundamentalist Christian pastor, and although he met his maker in 2006, the trademark is still held by Milton, Florida's Gospel Projects Incorporated. The game's popularity grew throughout the United States, and the U.S. Navy is to thank for taking T-ball overseas. And in 2001, the White House T-ball initiative was launched to promote youth sports, organizing T-ball games on the White House lawn. Past commissioners of the initiative were baseball legends Cal Ripken Jr., Nolan Ryan, Barry Larkin, and Willie Mays. But the initiative was launched by none other than the former co-owner of the Texas Rangers and 43rd U.S. President, George W. Bush. There's not a lot that can be said in a brief bio of the president colloquially known as W, but we're going to focus on the nice stuff. Currently a painter living on a ranch in Texas, George and former First Lady Laura often come out in support of relief organizations in the wake of natural disasters around the world, standing alongside other former leaders like Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and until recently, the late Jimmy Carter. Aside from their home in Texas, the Bushes are also known to vacation at their compound in Kennebunkport, Maine, along with their children, Barbara and Jenna. Though both are heavily involved with health-centric nonprofit organizations and movements for equality, Jenna has recently become a more public-facing figure, now as co-host of The Today Show. And though she has success outside of her family's fame, she and Barbara certainly have had their fair share of interesting experiences as high-profile teens during the George W. Bush presidency. The press went wild when they were caught drinking underage. Furthering her public perception as a lush, Jenna was also caught trying to buy alcohol with a fake ID, which is an odd thing for somebody so recognizable to try and do. But not all of her stories are about booze. During the W presidential era, Jenna Bush also recalls being asked to help a young actress with her role as a first daughter in the film First Daughter. However, Jenna Bush declined, indicating that the actress, Katie Holmes, would be disappointed to hear how uninteresting her experiences actually were. Perhaps Holmes would have asked beloved White House dogs Barney and Mrs. Beasley. Katie Holmes, who rose to fame as Joey in Dawson's Creek, broke out into film starting in 1997 in The Ice Storm and would continue to wow audiences with roles in Disturbing Behavior, Go, Wonder Boys, Pieces of April, Batman Begins, and of course, Jack and Jill. But it would be a role in a 1999 film that would pair her up with screen legend Dame Helen Mirren in a battle of wits and crossbows. Greetings, Starfighters. This is Ruined Childhoods, and on this episode, we're doing a deep dive into Teaching Mrs. Tingle, the story of high school students caught cheating, teeing up their teacher from hell to put them all in danger of failing. Dan, as a high school teacher, do you think any of your students would be capable of holding you hostage until you agreed to change their grades?
No.
Oh, no. Really?
No. Do I think they'd be capable of it?
That's the question.
No.
Okay.
Not at all. Not at all. No.
Do you suppose any of them listen to this podcast?
No. And any of them who do would not need to hold me hostage to change their grades.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, they would not need me to change. No, I'm just saying.
I do not get the impression that you are a Mrs. Tingle type.
I'm definitely not. No, in fact, I described myself today as a doormat. Too.
Oh, okay.
I was like, and then the kids, like some of these kids told me that I was their most strict teacher. And I said, do the others even show up?
Well, also, you did tell me that one of them lent you the DVD of one of our upcoming movies. So
yes,
you have a nice rapport with your students.
I have a good rapport with most of my, I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but they are, I do my best. Like, I'm not one of those teachers who actively dislikes any children. There are some students that frustrate me more than others, but
sure,
they're kids figuring stuff out. So I don't really hold grudges. Now I don't think I give any of them reasons to hold grudges either.
Oh, that's good.
So yes, no. Besides, I wouldn't want to even risk it.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, Dan, was this your first time watching Teaching Mrs. Tingle?
It was indeed my first time. Though I feel like I had maybe made attempts before, but this was my first time all the way through. How about you, John?
I think that it's same. It was definitely on my radar, but I feel like I got it kind of tied up with movies like The Faculty, where it was like, it seemed like such a similar thing, even though they're very different. While I was watching this, I was just like, man, there really was this big boom of these high school movies around this time that were, fun thrillers.
Right.
I think you would, Thrilomedy, if we were going to go by arachnophobia verbiage.
Oh, yes. As well we should. The original Thrilomedy. And we're not talking about that. That's maybe we could save that for our final episode of this season. I don't know. And in fact, we don't know. We're on T right now.
Yeah.
And by the way, well, if you're joining us here for the first time, my name's Dan and I'm with John. We are brothers biologically, and we are also huge movie fans, which is why we are doing this podcast. And we're here to just talk about, hey, where could this story or where could these characters find a new home? Or is this a remakeable, a sequelable? We're going to talk about the movie and then talk about, hey, what can we do with this?
For anybody listening to this podcast, you're here in one of two ways.
Yeah.
You've listened to the podcast before or watched it on YouTube or Spotify, or you're just a real Tingle head and you're out there seeking Teaching Mrs. Tingle content, in which case, this is our show. Welcome.
Yeah. And, hey, whatever. Maybe the algorithm brought you here. For whatever reason.
The algorithm.
You're here. Please stick around. We're going to talk some Teaching Mrs. Tingle and some 90s teenage thrilomedies and some Kevin Williamson, who wrote most of them.
Well, right. I mean, Kevin Williamson definitely gave like a big shockwave into the cinema world and like made these movies possible. I mean, Kevin Williamson, who definitely made his name with Dawson's Creek, took it to the screen in a very major way with Scream.
Oh yeah.
And I went through and I watched almost all of the Scream movies over the past week because I feel like I've only ever seen the first one, maybe the second one.
Yeah.
And I got to say the two most recent ones, it's not my favorite thing when movies are so meta.
Yeah.
But I did feel like it was true to the original movie's Scream in its sensibilities, while also like upping the stakes and also making the like gore more fun.
Okay. And I will say for Scream is that Scream was kind of doing the meta thing before everyone was doing it. And Scream, not the movie we're here to talk about, but groundbreaking and established Kevin Williamson.
Well, you also can't talk about Teaching Mrs. Tingle without talking about Scream.
Well, no, absolutely not. No. And Scream, maybe we'll have another episode one day devoted to it, but a great movie. I remember seeing in the theater and loving.
Oh, it's definitely one of the most impressionable movies of our lifetime, I would say. It really changed the way that horror movies for a more general audience were made. And it really, it launched certain careers. I mean, Matthew Lillard, it propelled into a different category.
Skeet
Nev
Ulrich.
Campbell, Skeet Ulrich was great. Like, it's such, and
Rose
of course,
McGowan.
like,
Rose
McGowan, who, she doesn't get nearly enough credit for her contributions to incredible films. We just talked about her on our Ready to Rumble episode, which was maybe
Scream, David Arquette.
David Arquette, of course. So it's something different there. But in Teaching Mrs. Tingle, which is it Kevin Williamson's only movie that he directed? Maybe one of two movies that he directed?
It was definitely the first movie he directed.
Yeah, I'm going to just verify that really quickly because it is a little shocking.
He did direct one of the Scream, at least one of the Scream sequels.
The upcoming Scream movie, Scream 7. So his sophomoric directorial effort has yet to be released, which is fascinating. So to date, Teaching Mrs. Tingle is the only feature film that he's directed. And I mean, when you stack it up against some of his other work, it doesn't compare. But I believe that this was one that maybe was written. Was it written before Scream? Did he also do? He also did I Know What You Did Last Summer, which I think was written before Scream. So that one is kind of like it's compared to Scream in kind of a lesser than way.
Well, because it came out the following year, and it was like, okay, with the teen actors that were not in Scream. So I Know What You Did Last Summer is adopted from a Lois Duncan novel, Master of the Young Adult Thriller.
Yeah.
And that one had Sarah Michelle Gellar, Jennifer Love Hewitt, Freddie Prinze Jr., Ryan Philippe was the other.
Yeah, Ryan Phillippe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I remember. I know. And I Know What You Did Last Summer had
Johnny Galecki.
Oh yeah. Johnny Galecki was up in that. We had like that. It kind of had a similar vibe, not as clever, but with the whole like slasher, kind of reinvigorating the slasher genre.
Well, that one was also picking up on the idea of like urban legends, because it's kind of like there's even a whole segment where they're talking about the scary story about the guy with the hook for a hand and the teens in the woods and everything. And then, the villain uses a giant like fisherman's hook that you use for like, dragging around enormous like tuna or whatever on the dock.
I'm remembering, I'm not sure which one it was. I think it was one of the Scary Movies. Okay. Where they did the whole thing. So the whole premise of I Know What You Did Last Summer is like they hit this guy with a car.
Right.
And then he's gone. And the I Know What You Did Last Summer parody, it stands out, and I haven't seen whichever one it was. I haven't seen it in years. But I just remember like the guy getting hit with the guy gets hit by the car, and he's fine, but all the other characters are like, what do we do? What do we hide the body? What do we do with the body? And he's like, really, I'm fine. And they're like, well, we need to make up a story. And he's like, not necessary. So yeah, I don't think
I've ever seen the Scary movies.
I know I saw the first 3, and I only saw the second one in the theater. Mm-hmm. I'm almost positive it was in one of those, and it was really. I thought that was like. It's obviously it's still in my head.
Sure, yeah, no, that's a very funny premise. But what's really great about these like movies also is that they had a common thread of plucking, like teenage television actors from the small screen and bringing them to the big screen in a significant way. You just mentioned Sarah Michelle Gellar. Here we have Katie Holmes, and not that this is her first movie or anything, but it's putting her in a more prominent role. She had done Disturbing Behavior, but she wasn't the main character in that one. Which I also watched the other day for the first time
because I was part of that genre.
Dude, I also watched First Daughter because I was like,
okay,
if I'm going to reference it, I may as well put it on. And Michael Keaton as the president.
Damn,
why not?
What would I give to live in a world where Michael Keaton is the president?
Oh boy, yeah, amen to that. Yeah, Michael Keaton, who, if you follow him on Instagram, you know his politics quite well.
Yeah.
And what a treat.
Yeah.
And so for Teaching Mrs. Tingle, not a horror movie.
No.
Could have been a horror movie.
Oh yeah.
Could have gone in that direction, but it's more of just like a teenage. It's like light thriller.
Yeah. I think that's what it's going for, or like thrillamedy.
Yeah.
I think is maybe the most accurate term for what it's going for.
Yeah. Dan, do you want to do a little synopsis?
Yeah, sure. Here, let's see what this movie's all about here. Leanne is a high school overachiever. Rather than having much of a social life, she buries her face in books and goes the extra mile for school projects. Her motive? Not ending up like her mother, a single waitress with substance abuse issues. But she isn't completely devoid of a social life. She has her best friend Jolynn, a plucky wannabe actress who doesn't have much else going on, though she is voraciously in love with hot underachiever bad boy Luke Cherner. Luke accepts his role in the world and has committed to doing the bare minimum to get through high school. But this underachiever has a big fat crush on our aforementioned overachiever, so when he gets a copy of the final exam for their most reviled teacher's class, Luke tries to sneak a copy to Leanne. Insulted by the mere idea of cheating, Leanne tells him off, but isn't able to ditch the test fast enough and is caught by the evil teacher herself, Mrs. Tingle. With Mrs. Tingle set to address the cheating scandal with Principal Potter the next morning, the teens need to act fast. Thinking they could go to Mrs. Tingle's home and talk her out of her plan seemed risky enough. But things get way out of hand when they end up tying her to her bed and taking extreme measures to blackmail her. Teaching Mrs. Tingle is written and directed by Kevin Williamson and stars Katie Holmes as Leanne, Barry Watson as Luke, Marissa Coughlin as Jolynn, Dame Helen Mirren as Mrs. Tingle. We've also got Jeffrey Tambor, Michael McKean, Molly Ringwald, Vivica A. Fox, and Leslie Ann Warren as Leanne's mom.
Yeah, it's a fine movie. It does what it sets out to accomplish.
I don't know that I agree with that.
Here is why I think that it's not garbage. When I was reading about it, it seemed like the most respectable person involved, Dame Helen Mirren, had a really positive experience working on the movie and believed in putting something out into the world that kind of gave these values a platform, and enjoyed her experience making it, and
she enjoyed the paycheck she got making it.
Enjoyed the paycheck, but also appreciated that Kevin Williamson considered her for a role like this and wasn't afraid to confront her with this type of role. I think that it was on Wikipedia, but
yeah.
There was a quote from Helen Mirren. Of her casting, Mirren said, "This is not the sort of film I'm usually associated with, so I was thrilled that Kevin would think of me for this role. For me, Teaching Mrs. Tingle addresses teenagers' insecurities, ambitions, and fears about the future. Remembering back to the ages of Leanne, Luke, and Jolynn, fear of the future is the most powerful thing driving you on. You don't know what's going to happen to you, and it's terrifying. I think adults forget how scary that is." And so I appreciate how much consideration Helen Mirren put into the message behind this movie and the situation that these teens are in. And a big driving force for Katie Holmes' character, Leanne, is, making something of herself and breaking a pattern. And that pressure comes through, and it makes a lot of sense in the movie. And I feel like Katie Holmes does a completely fine job of portraying that type of character.
I should establish right now that I don't want to say qualms with the movie, but I can't even call it a dislike. I feel so neutral about this movie. I don't believe, at least because of the performances. I think that there's a great premise here in this movie, and the sense that I got watching it was that there's a lot that got cut out, and that at some point, like, this was a much better or much strong, like, that there's a script that is stronger, and it feels like this was the victim of a lot of like studio cuts.
Well, allegedly there was a lot of revision that needed to happen as a result of the shootings at Columbine.
Yes.
Which we've talked about before impacting movies.
Yeah.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I even think that the original title was supposed to be Killing Mrs. Tingle.
Right.
And so for it to be, I don't know, watered down a little bit makes sense. And it's good to know the context before judging it based on the potential that it could have had.
Oh, no, absolutely. And it's definitely like what do you do in this case when you have this movie set to be released and then you have this tragedy that happens? I mean, this movie came out, I want to say, was it August 99? I feel like it was a later summer release.
August 20th, 1999.
August 20th. So, but it's already being promoted, and this is so August 20th, 4 months to the day after Columbine. Columbine happened April 20th, 99. So, like, I like understand that decision, and I understand the decision that like this movie in that climate post Columbine is risky.
Yeah.
And yes, if you were going to stick with that release date and have the movie come out no matter what, yeah, you have to make some changes. It just, to me, felt like what was lost added to the impact of the movie.
Okay.
Or might have added, I don't know, but might have added. I mean, also I read that that they were originally going to like do this for an R rating and then toned it down to a PG-13, which also makes sense.
Yeah. And that happens all the time.
Yeah, totally. But it's almost like the switches that, like, an easy example of something that was obviously changed because of the rating change is the quoting. There's a scene when Jolene is kind of acting out a scene from The Exorcist.
Right. Yeah.
That she does we from the New York, New Jersey area call the Channel 11 version of it, where she says, "Take me, repeat it." And the original, I don't know how explicit I want to get right now, but the original line is quite far from that.
Sure. Yeah.
And I get the sense that using, like, either dubbing in or reshooting with that other.
Oh, it was definitely dubbed.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was ADR'd for sure.
Yeah. 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 It just felt like, I don't know, kind of sloppy.
Well, yeah, they definitely could have done a lot more with finessing it to make the movie within the edits feel a little bit tighter and more enjoyable, I guess you can say. There they definitely leaned more into the humor when possible. Jeffrey Tambor's character, for example, who plays the coach who is having a secret relationship with Mrs. Tingle, and the way that they are trying to get away with him being at the house, but still not knowing that Mrs. Tingle is tied up and gagged and everything. So, and credit to Marissa Coughlan, who is a lot of fun in this movie.
Yeah.
I feel like because it relies so heavily on the humor, she's the one that holds that together.
Yeah.
It is on her shoulders the whole time. She's excellent. I mean, a couple years later, you see her in Super Troopers, and she's absolutely exceptional in that.
Yeah.
And to see her in this, it's just like, awesome.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Happy
Like,
to see her.
The performances are great, and I don't think that there's much I would do to change. Like, I don't know that I would necessarily change the performances. Or
I
feel like it's mostly
a lot
like
of it comes
editing.
down to the edit.
Yeah. But but the premise though is a lot of fun.
Yeah, the premise is interesting. The idea of the high achieving student who is relying on an A from this one teacher in order to become valedictorian. That whole level is just like, okay, they award a scholarship to the valedictorian and only the valedictorian, no ifs, ands, or buts. And it's between her and this one other very irritating student.
Of course.
And
Trinity.
Of course, yes. Who's totally good in this, and it's fun. And the way that they're kind of pitted against each other, or it just raises the stakes for Leanne to perform on this. And when Barry Watson's character presents her with Luke Churner?
Yeah.
I knew that it was like
churning butter. Churner.
I know. I remember it sounds like Turner with a T, but
Right.
It's not.
No.
So it makes it just one element more complicated. So when he presents them with the test that's going to come out, and okay, I think that it's been long enough that the statute of limitations on this has passed, but in high school, my senior year, I didn't give a rat's ass about chemistry. And so I was never going to go into a chemistry field, so it didn't matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
I found the final exam because it was in a folder on one of the tables in the chemistry lab, written on it. Oh no, it wasn't chemistry. It was physics. It was PHYSFINEX, and it's like physics final exam. Okay, and yoinked a copy. Had a high achieving junior who was in the class take the test and get all the answers, and I cheated on that test.
All right. No problem. Do you remember who you had? Was that, you said it was physics?
I know who I had, but I will not drop the name.
No, it was physics though, you said?
It was physics.
Not chemistry, yeah. I was going to say I had, because I never did anything like that. Though I will, so I feel like I need to, quid pro quo here a little bit. But in one of my history classes.
Okay.
So first of all, the seating.
Now this is interesting because history is relevant to what you teach and have taught.
Well, yeah, no, this is true. But I have taught history.
Yeah.
Once. But this was in like US History 1. The seating was all, it was rows and everything. And like, we don't really do that anymore. And I sat towards the back of the room. That was where my assigned seat was, like for the entire year.
Mm-hmm.
And the teacher would not leave the front of the room. This was not a teacher who walked around.
Got it.
He would stay usually behind his podium. So there were some times where we would have to write like things about like primary sources from, the 17th century. And you had to like do it from the primary source book, but you had to remember I'd have the primary source book open under my desk.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And he couldn't see it. But also on his multiple choice tests, it was like he made the copies from the answer key. And what you could do is you could see, so like it would have like the question, and then, you know, it was the multiple choice, and there was always like a line under the right answer.
Oh, weird. That's just lazy. That's the teacher's
That's
fault.
not cheating. That's not cheating. That's taking advantage of a situation.
Yeah.
But which I guess is cheating. But
well, what I did is more textbook definition.
You did it. You pulled a Luke Churner, except
I
for
pulled
your
a
own
Churner.
benefit.
It was
not your crush.
Yeah. Right. And the situation was also, I mean, the stakes were pretty low. The teacher was a very nice person. I liked him fine. I had a hard time with physics, like keeping a lot of that stuff straight. And so it was just like, look, I'm never going to go into a field where I have to know physics. I understand the basics, but beyond that, I feel like this isn't going to, you know, make it or break it for me in the future.
In fact, you're never gonna regret that choice.
Yeah. But I did have a high school science teacher who was a Mrs. Tingle type. I will not mention their name, but it felt like this teacher had it in for me. And I had this teacher for earth science, and then I was assigned this teacher again for chemistry, but before too long into the semester, I switched to a different class with a teacher who was way better.
It's interesting. My earth science teacher, I felt kind of was that way.
All right. After we finish recording, we can talk about all the names.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, I feel like everybody at some point has had that teacher who's been like, you know, that Mrs. Tingle. And some of them, and like some of those teachers, you know, to one person, they're, you know, like I had a teacher that I'm pretty sure a lot of kids didn't like because of their, you know, humor and demeanor. And they definitely had a bit of that Mrs. Tingle vibe to them. But I really liked them. I really got along with them. And they chewed my ass out on many an occasion because I had them in 9th grade and 12th grade. And I was a frequent offender of not doing the assigned reading.
Ooh, okay.
And sometimes I could pull it off. Sometimes I'd be like, all right, I'm just going to listen to what people say. I'm going to leaf through the book during the conversations. I'm going to be like, okay, all right, great. All right, let me throw this in here.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it was just obvious that I had no idea what I was talking about. And they'd be like, how dare you come in here without doing your reading?
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. That's so tough. The thing about Mrs. Tingle though, is that she did have it in for Leanne.
Yes.
And look, I don't care about spoiling anything because it doesn't really matter, but like this, she truly did want Leanne to fail. She wanted her to have her mother's fate because she doesn't feel like she deserved to have anything else. No,
and that friggin' like bound journal from the Salem witch trials thing.
Right.
As I'm listening to the writing,
Yeah, at the beginning of the movie, you see Leanne put together this very thick book that she made from scratch. She took a lighter and she burned the edges of the paper, everybody. She bound this thing in leather, and it was the assignment was that people had to present something to the class about some sort of historical thing. It was a very vague assignment. This is one of those where I was like, I wish we could just do it like that, because it was basically like come in and do history, because right before Leanne goes, you have Jolene up there just impersonating Marilyn Monroe. Right. Yeah. And not like anything interesting about her. Well, I think she does kind of justify it a little bit. Doesn't she do like some sort of Marilyn Monroe like conspiracy theory stuff? Well, yeah, about how basically like how she inspired Jack and helped him
like make decisions.
Yeah, she was like JFK's like unofficial advisor.
Yeah, right. She was his Elon.
Oh.
All right. So, but Marilyn, yeah, no, that was Jolene's, and like, and then there's the who has the crossbow? Is that just like?
Oh, right. So this is Chekhov's crossbow.
Oh, right.
And so it's somebody in the class built a crossbow, and it actually works, but it was designed for some sort of historical presentation thing.
Yeah, it's really
and of
hard.
Course, that comes up at the end.
It's really hard to tell, and it also feels like Mrs. Tingle's one class covers all of history.
Well, yeah, I mean, Cherner comes in and puts a rock down and says Plymouth Rock.
Yeah. Although I guess maybe American history. So if he did yeah, I'm getting into the weeds here, but it would like Plymouth Rock and possibly the crossbow and the like Salem witch trial journal. That kind of like, okay, maybe this was US 1, though. And the other seniors. So
the other like ultra overachiever, I don't think we see her presentation, but she builds this like castle.
Oh, right. Yeah. Trudy. She builds right. Yeah.
Trudy.
She builds the castle. So that's not American history. She didn't build medieval times.
Yeah. Right.
The parking spaces are to scale.
Yeah. So teaching Mrs. Tingle, I feel like for what it is, it's fine. It's not a must watch. And like we were saying, like it makes for an interesting story. Now, I don't know if the reasons why teaching Mrs. Tingle got downgraded from R to PG-13 and edited and everything as a result of a high school tragedy kind of paved the way for a lack of high school thrillers. I mean, lighthearted high school thrillers, because certainly we have movies like We Need to Talk About Kevin and things like that, where it's it's very serious about those types of things. But for a lighthearted movie like this, it's like we just don't have the ability to do that anymore.
We can't be lighthearted about these things when we know how. It's easy to be lighthearted about these things when you're distanced from them, but when you're being reminded that this is no laughing matter and this is not a situation that gets resolved in 90 minutes.
Right.
It's right. And I mean, you know, who's to say like what they took out for that reason and what was changed for other reasons. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, and I'm trying to think like, what did we have after like urban legends? I feel like they moved out of high schools.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about something like, I Know What You Did Last Summer, there's nothing that's set in a school.
No.
Like that is all just people who have just recently basically graduated from high school. The Scream movies after the first one are all like college or just out living in the world type of thing.
Well, I feel like eventually they get back to high school when you have like Jenna Ortega, or maybe not. I don't know.
So you know what? I didn't see. Oh no, you know what? I did. The first one that she's in college.
Oh, okay. All right.
Now The Faculty was in 1998, but the thing about The Faculty also is that it's aliens, and it's not like, I mean, there is a gun in it, but it's different.
Yeah. So The Faculty, and yeah, of course, watching this, you think about The Faculty. Faculty came out late 98.
Yeah.
And it's one of those movies that I feel like it does. And Kevin Williamson did write that one too, right?
Did he write The Faculty?
Am I making that up?
I am looking that up right now. No, yes, he did write The Faculty. Oh my God.
Yeah.
He is the film world's Bruce Coville. author of My Teacher is an Alien. He kind of took that and decided to kind of advance that a little bit.
I'm pretty sure I have a copy of that book somewhere in this office.
I know somewhere, I think maybe at our parents' house, I've got like a signed copy of some Bruce Coville book.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, that was a big thing, is kind of like my ex is an alien, and I don't mean my like ex, partner, but
right.
like my fill in the blank is an alien or whatever. And to do that with the faculty, it definitely felt like it was an exception, even though that was pre-Columbine. It is an exception to it, or that kind of thing is like safe from what we're talking about, because it is a supernatural kind of a thing, or a paranormal kind of a thing. And it lets you get away with a lot more.
It's a little different. You don't have, and I just remembered about like, just because I'm trying to think, like, it's really like student on student violence is something that would be kind of a red flag. In Teaching Mrs. Tingle, I think all you see there is when Trudy almost gets hit with the crossbow, which they kept that in. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, no,
but she's annoying.
But the faculty is, it's a step or two further away from reality. Yeah. There's something about the faculty that also, it just feels much more complete. Also, they did not go for the PG-13. I'm pretty sure that movie is rated R.
I think so too. I mean, also another exceptional cast with that one.
Oh yeah.
Josh Hartnett, who we've talked about pretty recently, Elijah Wood, Clea Duvall. Like, it's a great cast.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure.
Jason Patrick.
Who? Robert Patrick.
Jason Patrick.
Robert Patrick. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm fighting a cold. I'm going to blame that one on my cold.
And hey, Dumph, Sean Hatosi.
Dumph. Whenever I feel like I'm seeing him pop up more and more and more, and not like it's so much in new things, but like things that I just happen to be catching up on. It's like, Dumph, you're in this one too.
Yeah, he's a good shit. I know I just said that, but yeah, I mean, damn, that movie is loaded, because you got Jon Stewart, B.B. Newirth, right? Christopher McDonald, Piper Laurie is in that.
Famke Janssen.
Indeed, yeah. So yeah, that movie's stacked. But also, when you think about, like, I was thinking about this movie and in thinking about, like, okay, well, what change, like, what would we do with Teaching Mrs. Tingle? And I was thinking about, like, what if Mrs. Tingle, what if we find out that, like, after they go to her house and tie her to the bed, that Mrs. Tingle actually does have like demonic powers? And then I was like, but that's almost too close to the faculty, where they discover that their teachers are evil aliens.
Well, do you want to go on and talk more about what you're thinking for a direction for this? Because what I'm thinking is actually very close to that.
Okay. All right. So why don't we just, why don't we just go? Let's
okay.
Go.
Well,
tell me about
it. Where I was thinking for Teaching Mrs. Tingle is that they would approach her and find her at her house, and as they explore her house, discover that she is into the occult, and that there is a driving force, and that there is a reason why. What?
I'm sorry. I recently saw Heretic, and
oh yes, well. I mean, I saw Heretic too, which is excellent, and that maybe informed the way that I was thinking about this. But like, perhaps there is a deeper reason why she is targeting Leanne, and maybe that's her way of like baiting her students, is by finding the ones who are the high achievers and trying to like tamp them down, to drive them to like do something extreme,
to sell their souls to Satan.
Pretty much. Yeah, exactly.
Now, if I may interject for a moment, because it actually reminds me of something else that came up that I wanted to point out, is that Mrs. Tingle also taught Luke's father, and references that at one point, and talks a bit, like, calls him a loser. It's kind of like McFlys are all losers from Back to the Future. So I think it would be kind of interesting, like, to see how that goes in the backstory. And maybe Luke's dad was somebody who turned down the offer.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, you know, churning, burning in hell.
Yeah, Heretic is definitely a good reference point. I mean, I, like many other people, I'm also watching Severance, and there's just so much about that and the theories going around about whether it's mind control or cloning or some sort of nefarious things that are under the guise of, you know, a company that could be likened to like Amazon or something like that.
Right. And I do really like the idea, and I think it's a lot of fun of having these students who they're going to their teacher's house,
right?
And they're going to address
dope house, by the way.
Oh yes, I mean, well, I don't know, did we find out what her husband did? Although then again, she's been teaching for a while, so
sure.
I'm like, that house on a teacher's salary. No, she's but I think it would be fun if like they accidentally uncovered that like their teacher's a cult leader.
Right.
Like you could go kind of wacky with that.
Yeah, and you could make it again, still use Helen Mirren.
Mm-hmm.
Why not? Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. Why not use Helen Mirren? I mean, Hugh Grant is out. Though I'm imagining him as like a Mrs. Tingle character, even though I guess it's kind of Heretic, which he's so good in that.
He's fantastic.
Just keep hearing him in my head singing, I'm a creep, I'm a weirdo.
He's excellent.
He's great.
Yeah, I'm loving this new era of Hugh Grant.
Oh no, older Hugh. Like you give me a movie with 2025 Hugh Grant and Ralph Fiennes. I don't need anything more. That throw Helen Mirren in there just for the fun of it. But yeah, no, that is
Helen Mirren, who is in the Fast and Furious movies because she loves them.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. Helen Mirren is a lot of fun. She's great. So, all right. So we've got demonic Mrs. Tingle. That's the cell. That's the cell. That's the pitch there.
I think
is kind of similar setup, but with the whole like sell your soul or you'll be stuck in this town forever. I dig it. I think that's an improvement. I think that's I mean, all due respect, I think that's an improvement.
And you know what? And Trudy is in on it.
Oh.
Because you need somebody on the inside to make the target hungry.
Mm. So Trudy is an engine of maybe Trudy is the daughter of Satan.
I feel like Trudy is more of a pawn, where they're just kind of using her to
maybe her mom's
help them.
Maybe her parents are part of the cult. Who knows?
But also maybe Leanne, there's something special about her that makes her more enticing to them to bring her in. Like maybe there's a prophecy or something. We love a good prophecy.
She with the raven hair and leather-bound journal.
Totally.
And you know, I mean, the whole idea of witchcraft is introduced there. You'd even keep that in there because of the whole thing about witchcraft and how she responds to that. It makes sense, man.
Yeah.
That's great. I like that. I like that. I was kind of laughed it off at my, like, you know, you could remake it with Mrs. Tingle having demonic powers, but I didn't think about that whole catch with the, like, there's that something going on and like, we need to keep this person down and get them desperate enough to sign the contract.
Watching Teaching Mrs. Tingle, it's just like, okay, so this lady just sucks. But also she has the ability to just, you know, use their teenage emotions against them. Mm-hmm. And, you know, she gets out of this situation where she's tied up and everything. And she's willing to kill children with a crossbow. Like, I don't know. I mean, there's something else going on there that they're not talking about.
Yeah. It's kind of giving me a little devil's advocate vibe too, which I like.
Ooh. I love Devil's Advocate.
Just a little Devil's Advocate vibe, but Helen Mirren could certainly tear it up and give like that, like Pacino at the end of Devil's Advocate when he's just full on like
Satan.
Yeah, that's that's great. But
so what you got, Dan?
All right. Well, John, as we've established, I am a high school teacher, and part of my capacity at the high school is working with the school's theater program and seeing the trend in theater of shows that musicals that are being written for Broadway, but almost seem like they're intended for community theaters and schools to do.
Okay.
And like, that's where the money's coming from. And Teaching Mrs. Tingle, I think, would give this movie kind of a better legacy if you were to turn it into a musical. And like, yeah, Broadway, but like, I could really see it becoming a popular one to do at high schools. It's got I mean, you've got 3 female leads, and let's be honest, most high school theater programs are a little heavy on female identifying performers.
Right. Yeah.
You need a couple of guys in there, but you really only need like, kind of one younger guy.
Right.
And everyone else could be like the character actors. It would have been, I probably would have played the principal or the coach if we did it in my high school.
Well, that's the thing is like you get somebody who's like a personality hire essentially to play like the coach, somebody who's a bit of like a class goofball that is down to do whatever. And that's a lot of fun. For the Michael McKean character, the principal, there's not much to do.
No.
Yeah.
I'd give him a song. I'd give like him and Molly, like the Molly Ringwald character and the Vivica A. Fox character, a song together about how much they hate Mrs. Tingle.
Sure. Yeah.
But there wouldn't. So you've got those good supporting roles, but it really feels like it could transition nicely into being like that type of musical that gets done at all the schools, like Mean Girls and Legally Blonde, which were arguably adapted from more popular movies, and Bring It On as well.
Sure.
In there. But this, like, I could see this being fun. I could see this being something that kids like want to do.
You don't need a lot of set pieces.
No.
Yeah.
No. It could be done. And yeah, you could beef up some of the parts. So sure. I would say an adaptation into a musical, but like almost specifically for that, like high school and community theater run.
Yeah.
I don't know what the math is on that, but I imagine that whoever's getting paid from those shows, I'd be interested to see like how much let's say a show like Grease. I would be interested to see how much money has been made by Broadway productions of Grease versus high school productions of Grease.
Interesting. Yeah.
How many of those have there been?
Sure. That's a very interesting question.
Yeah. And hey, that could be, I don't think that like, Teaching Mrs. Tingle has the potential to be like, was the next like, great musical. But it would also be the kind of movie or the kind of like high school production where it would like make weird pop culture news websites and stuff where it's just like, hey, this high school in Ohio is doing a musical version of Teaching Mrs. Tingle. Oh, right. Yeah. Especially if it was like, if like, someone, if like a teacher, if I wasn't so busy working on my Blue Heaven musical, no, I've got to see that one through, but I would definitely pivot and do Teaching Mrs. Tingle and like, risk all the lawsuits and all that.
Sure.
Hey,
yeah. Also,
nobody gets good press by suing a high school. Just ask anyone involved with the whole Alien high school production there in Jersey from a few years ago.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't think
everybody loved that.
Sued. They got supported. But,
sure.
Yeah.
It only elevated their platform.
Absolutely. Yeah. Besides, it looked really awesome.
Totally. Well, if any of you listeners out there have any ideas of how you would revisit Teaching Mrs. Tingle, which is something I never thought I'd say before, email us ruinedchildhoodspod@gmail.com and check out Ruined Childhood's pod.com for a lot of other fun stuff and merch and whatnot. And give us a review on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a comment on YouTube or Spotify. We'd love to hear from you. And Dan, on our journey going from A to Z, then Z to A, we're almost through with our first half of this, which feels wild. So we just did T. What are we doing for you?
For you, we are going to be talking about 1995's The Usual Suspects, directed by Bryan Singer, written by Christopher McQuarrie, starring Gabriel Byrne, Kevin Spacey, Kevin Pollak, Pete Postlethwaite, Chaz Palminteri, Benicio del Toro, Stephen Baldwin, Susie Amos, Dan Hedaya, Giancarlo Esposito, celebrating its 30th anniversary this year.
Yeah, and also it's got 2 U's in the first word.
It sure does.
There's got a U in suspects. So we've got a bunch of U's in there.
Well, including you, who's going to watch The Usual Suspects and be ready to talk about it. And you listeners, you starfighters, who are going to come back and listen to us and maybe send us an email and tell us what your thoughts are about The Usual Suspect. Plural.
Well, Dan, as you are heading over to Mrs. Tingle's house, I wish you a good journey.
With my crossbow, right? Good journey.